You might have seen some spots in your house that get pretty dusty, but you usually miss them when cleaning. These places, like the top shelves behind the TV, delicate stuff, the bottom of furniture, and windows, often don't get cleaned. I replace windows for a living and usually think that tough guys don't really dust, but sometimes even I have to do it. This all started when I was putting new sheets on the bed. I don't brag about it to my buddies, but I don't mind doing it. Fresh sheets are great for relaxing. Once, while fixing the sheets, I accidentally knocked down one of my wife's ceramic angels from the shelf over the bed. Luckily, it fell on the mattress. Standing on the bed in my socks, I saw that the shelf was really dusty. Since no one was around, I took a good washcloth and started to clean it. Right before I began, I noticed something. One spot around another angel looked clean, like someone had just touched it. It couldn't have been just my wife because she wouldn't clean just one part of the shelf, and she probably couldn't reach the sides even if she stood on the bed. When I took a closer look at the angel, I found something crazy. A camera lens in one of its eyes. I had a bunch of thoughts, some pretty worrying. In the end, I decided to just leave everything as it was. I went downstairs, made some coffee, and thought about what was going on. I was really puzzled about why Cynthia would put a camera in our bedroom. A bunch of ideas crossed my mind. Maybe she was checking if I was cheating, wanted to make videos for herself when I wasn't there, or even to tape times with someone else. But then a scarier thought hit me. What if she was selling our videos, or sharing them with someone? That idea freaked me out. I didn't really believe she was cheating, but this tech stuff was way over my head. So I reached out to the security expert at our company. He's a pro with home security systems and works with private detectives a lot. He made it clear that finding where the camera was recording to was super important. I asked him to help me out, and he agreed to come by right away. "Why do we need to find where it records so fast?" I asked Paul. "Ryan, there's a big chance you were on camera when you found it," Paul said. "If the camera isn't live streaming, once someone checks the recording, they'll know you saw it. That could make it harder to figure out who put it there. Wouldn't you first want to know what's been recorded?" "Man, I didn't think about all that," I said. After conducting a thorough search, we located the recording device in our basement, hidden behind some old paint cans on a shelf. Paul removed the disc, and we went upstairs to insert it into the DVD player. The footage included scenes from a couple of nights, including moments of intimacy between Cynthia and me, which barely crossed the line into graphic content. It also featured the moment when I discovered the camera. Upon inspecting the disc, Paul remarked, "Here's some good news. It seems no one has checked the latest video, and it doesn't appear to be actively streaming to anyone's computer. However, I can't be entirely certain. We can manipulate the recording on the disc so that whoever finds it will think it's corrupted, and they won't see your image or suspect that you discovered the camera. That should buy you some time to figure things out. Do you need any further assistance from me?" "No, Paul. Why don't you go make yourself a cup of coffee?" I suggested. "I'll let you know when I'm finished." As Paul wrapped up his work, I returned to the kitchen table with my coffee, pondering how to approach the task of informing Cynthia about the camera. I considered several approaches: ignoring it, testing her reactions, or directly confronting her. The last option didn't sit well with me, especially given Cynthia's recent irritability. Accusing her without concrete proof could potentially trigger an explosive reaction, and I wondered if her moodiness might be connected to the camera. After Paul had completed his work, I treated him to a beer. After careful consideration, I decided to proceed with a rather unconventional plan. In our sales office, there was a new colleague named Terry, who ranked as highly attractive on most men's scales. She had the ability to handle leering and suggestive comments from men gracefully without causing any offense. She was usually cheerful and had a good sense of humor. During lunch, I approached her to lay out my scheme, and Terry grinned and agreed to assist me. Interestingly, my wife was acquainted with one of the secretaries in the office, Harriet, as the secretary used to work at the same place where Cynthia currently works. I knew they had regular conversations, often discussing my interactions with other women at the office. Cynthia's distrust towards both me and other women had its origins in the revelation that she wasn't my first choice as a wife, which came to light during an incident at my high school reunion. My former rival, Dale, openly disclosed to Cynthia and those present that he had previously dated a woman we had both been involved with. Regrettably, she was my preferred choice, but I ultimately became the second option. Shortly after their engagement, I crossed paths with Cynthia, dated her, and eventually married her. Some suspected it might have been a rebound situation, but despite the circumstances, my love for Cynthia remained unwavering for over a decade. The new woman and I strategically positioned ourselves within earshot but out of sight from the secretary. "Ryan, I can't wait to explore that new game in bed. When can we give it a try?" I played along, responding, "I might be able to arrange a long lunch break tomorrow." "Can you?" "No problem. I'm thrilled. I've never attempted that in bed before." "Neither have I, and there's no one I'd rather try it with for the first time than you." "Thanks. That means a lot." The trap was set, and now I had to wait and see if it would elicit any reaction. Upon arriving home, Cynthia was in the kitchen, wearing a displeased expression. She asked, "Ryan, do you want to have lunch together tomorrow? It's been a while," all the while clearly observing my reaction. I stumbled over my words, replying, "I'm doing well, but I actually have lunch plans already." "I see. Can I get a rain check?" I reassured her, saying, "You know I wouldn't usually pass up lunch with you, but it's an old client who owns an apartment complex and I wouldn't want to disappoint them." I was content with my acting skills. She gave me a knowing look and responded, "Oh, well, maybe another time." For the remainder of the evening, we maintained our distance, both physically and emotionally. I read a sports magazine and watched TV while she did laundry and worked on crossword puzzles. Both Terry and I went to bed at our usual time without initiating any physical contact. The following day, Terry and I discreetly left, informing Harriet of our departure before heading to my house. We proceeded straight to my bedroom, positioning ourselves directly within the camera's view. I asked, "Are you ready for a great time?" Terry replied, "Yes, who goes first?" I produced a deck of UNO cards, dealt 7 to each of us, and began playing UNO in bed. After several rounds, we decided it was time to return to the office. As we passed by the secretary again, I quipped, "Thanks, that's the most fun I've had in bed in a while." Terry added once we were out of earshot, expressing her eagerness to hear about my conversation with my wife later that night. The remainder of the afternoon at work proved to be a struggle, as I was uncertain about what awaited me at home. Finally, the workday came to an end, and I headed back home, taking my time to allow Cynthia enough opportunity to see the video. I couldn't help but wear a wide grin. Upon arriving home, I was surprised to find Cynthia sitting on the couch, tears flowing down her face. Her sorrow quickly transformed into anger upon spotting me. "How could you?" she exclaimed. "With a girl half your age? What about our marriage?" I pretended to be clueless and responded, "What girl? I don't understand." Cynthia continued, "Don't play dumb. I heard about it. Bringing her into our home, cheating in our bed. I saw the disheveled bed. I want you to leave now." I protested. "Wait, you couldn't have seen anything incriminating. What are you talking about?" Cynthia retorted, "I didn't see anything. I heard it from Harriet about your rendezvous with the new girl. You were practically boasting about it. You think you got away with it because there's no proof, but I know." I was taken aback and asked, "Wait a second, you do have proof? You didn't watch it. What proof? What are you talking about?" Cynthia angrily replied, "The video from the camera you hid in our bedroom. What camera in what angle? What are you talking about?" I feigned ignorance, saying, "Don't play dumb. You know exactly what camera. You put it there." I vehemently denied it, stating, "I didn't put any camera anywhere. If I had one now, I'd put it up yours." "I can't believe you're treating me like this." "You probably removed the camera after witnessing what I did. Now you're attempting to cast me as the antagonist by fabricating stories. If you're insinuating any involvement on my part with a spy camera in our bedroom, you're either fabricating it or you're the one responsible for it. It may not be helpful at the moment, but I will investigate." Cynthia followed me upstairs, and I noticed that the angel above our bed was missing. The dust remained, but the angel was absent. "Notice the absence of the angel with the harp. I no longer possess an angel with a harp. You took it. I should have expected as much. I'll see if you also removed the recording device." "What recording device?" "Cynthia, are you pretending or are you—" Complete that sentence and you'll regret it. We proceeded to the basement, checked behind the paint cans, but found no trace of the recording device. No, you disposed of that as well. Stop accusing me and elucidate what's happening. Let's go upstairs, have coffee, and discuss this. At the kitchen table, I recounted the story of the sheet, the dust, the angel, and the security expert. Since I hadn't installed the camera, I suspected she had. We'll address your false assumption about me installing cameras later. For now, clarify how this relates to you and that device in our bedroom. I suspected you planted the camera to catch me in an affair, so I thought I'd retaliate by staging a scenario with a coworker, making it appear as though we were about to engage in a midday fling in our bed. We intentionally messed up our fabricated conversation, hoping she would prompt you to watch the video. You'd see us playing Uno in bed. That's why it was messy. I believed it would distress you to catch us playing cards instead of engaging. Everything is tainted by your distorted thinking and the state of our marriage. Are you playing Uno? Do you think I'm that naive? Indeed, you've already drawn that conclusion. Cynthia paused, composing herself. Ryan, if you suspected I installed cameras, why didn't you just ask me? Because I thought you were attempting to catch me having an affair. You fool. I would have inquired directly if I suspected that. I know when you're being deceitful. You wouldn't have questioned an affair if you were concealing one yourself. By catching me, you could justify the affair you either had or were planning. I braced for her response. Me having an affair, seriously? With whom? 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 Does the species or gender matter? What does grammar have to do with this? You're trying to divert attention from the fact that you suspect me of infidelity. I swear no one else has shared my bed since we got married. Is that clear enough for your befuddled mind? Ryan, there's only one thing happening here as far as I see it. You're trying to shift suspicion of an affair onto me. I can't believe you're treating me like this. I can't believe you're treating me like this. I want you to leave. I can't bear being in your presence with these unfounded accusations. Just go. If you're ready to apologize and ask for forgiveness, give me a call in a few days. I retreated, feeling a sense of shame and immense confusion. I made my way to a nearby motel without taking any belongings from home. I visited Walmart for essential items and also stopped by the liquor store to purchase my favorite bourbon. The following morning, I called in sick to work. After some rest and headache medicine, I examined my tablet, only to discover that Cynthia had already withdrawn half of our money from our accounts and canceled our joint credit card. My phone remained silent, as I had turned it off. I didn't want to hear from anyone except the mad scientist with a time machine. Even my functioning brain cells couldn't determine who had placed that accursed camera in our bedroom. If neither Cynthia nor I were responsible, and I even considered Anisha at this point, who could it have been? It had to be someone with a key to our house. None of our children had one, not even the neighbors. They had returned it after house-sitting. I reluctantly entertained an unsettling thought about our neighbor Frank and my wife, but surely she wouldn't stoop so low. I was utterly perplexed. I spent another day drowning in self-pity, accepting the unsolved mystery. Trying to find some normalcy, I went back to work, but my streak of bad luck didn't end there. At work, I was unexpectedly approached about a man insisting on seeing me. Despite feeling unprepared and swamped with work, I couldn't avoid meeting him. When I met the man, he handed me an envelope marking the start of legal proceedings from Cynthia. Reviewing her terms, it was clear the split wasn't fair. She even jokingly offered her ceramic angel collection, a thought which humorously led me to imagine using them for target practice. It was the first time I smiled in days. Then I started thinking about how to handle this situation without letting it escalate over a simple camera footage. Just as things seemed to be at their worst, Paul, the security expert, reached out to me. He had been trying to get in touch, claiming to have something important. He sent me a video that unexpectedly showed my own basement. To my surprise, there was a camera there too, focused on the paint cans hiding the recording device. The video revealed more. A man appeared on the screen. He was carefully placing the camera, making sure it was well hidden and angled correctly. His actions were deliberate, suggesting he was familiar with the place. This man, unknown to me, took the recording device and held the angel camera, indicating his involvement in the setup. He had arrived shortly after Terry and I had been in the basement. This new revelation added another piece to the puzzle, implicating a man possibly connected to Cynthia's past or her workplace, as our neighbors were unlikely to be involved. I returned Paul's call, questioning how the camera ended up in my basement, and if he was responsible for it. I revealed that I had been carrying a camera as a precaution after discovering the device, thinking he might want to be informed if someone attempted to tamper with it. I hadn't disclosed this earlier to avoid raising suspicions. I apologized, explaining that I didn't know him well enough back then, assuming he was Cynthia. I inquired about how the intruder knew to take the belongings and mentioned the possibility of another live streaming camera being involved. I forgave his hidden camera tactic and offered a reward for helping identify the man. While flowers were appreciated, I hoped he meant a Hershey's kiss. I asked if he knew of anyone who could be behind it, specifically someone at Cynthia's workplace. He mentioned Harry, but expressed reluctance to inquire, as it might be risky. There was someone else who didn't hold me in high regard at her office. I recounted how I had discreetly approached Harry, startling her when she noticed me looming. She threatened to call security, but I implored her, mentioning that someone was interfering with my marriage and asking if she recognized the man in a photo from her time working with Cynthia. Initially reluctant, she eventually provided information about the person we referred to as the water cooler warrior, Thomas Bell, who had spun tales about military experiences during breaks, but was, in reality, a supply clerk. Despite the truth coming to light, we had kept it under wraps to protect HR. He considered himself a ladies' man, particularly with Cynthia. Did she fall for his act? The man looked up fearfully, whimpering and insisting he was harmless. Despite his fear, I pressed him for answers about why he had installed a camera in our bedroom. He admitted his feelings for Cynthia and his hope to drive a wedge between us. His plan had been to catch me cheating, prompting Cynthia to leave me. He had copied her keys and planted the cameras when we were out, checking the footage periodically for about 3 months. When confronted with the fact that nothing incriminating had been recorded, he hesitated to respond. His desperation led him to consider using the footage to convince Cynthia that something was amiss, in hopes of persuading her to divorce me. He claimed he was on the verge of convincing her even without the video. Cynthia's arrival interrupted our confrontation. She was shocked and angered, admonishing me for attacking the man named Tom. Despite my protests and his confession, Cynthia was in disbelief and ordered me to leave. She warned that she would call the police for assault if I continued. With rain threatening, I hurriedly collected my essentials from the driveway where my belongings had been left for 2 days. In my anger, I scattered the rest around the yard. I decided against informing Cynthia about Tom's confession, realizing she had her own narrative. Preparing for the impending divorce, I hired a private investigator on Paul's recommendation. I pressed charges against Tom for breaking into our house, but Cynthia countered, claiming she had allowed him to install the camera. In the middle of the divorce process, I got my lawyer to work on getting me a better deal, while Cynthia's lawyer was busy making changes to her demands, making things even more tense between us. Around this time, Paul gave me a call. We decided to catch up over dinner, and I was expecting to hear some interesting stuff from him. During dinner, Paul filled me in on what he found out about Thomas Bell, the guy Cynthia had an affair with. It turns out Thomas's wife isn't the brightest, but she's definitely attractive. They got together back in high school when she fell hard for his sweet talk, ended up pregnant, and then they got married. Now, Thomas feels embarrassed to be seen with her in public, so they mostly keep to themselves or hang out with family. This got me thinking about how this all ties into my divorce. Paul mentioned that a private investigator they hired had a hunch that Thomas might still have videos of Cynthia and me. To avoid drawing attention, they sent another investigator from a different city to Thomas's house. Thomas's wife, thinking this guy was a colleague, let him in and showed him where the videos were stored. Some of these videos were labeled with Cynthia's name. When I looked at them, they showed Cynthia and Thomas in our bed, and there were some of me too. It was mostly just them being affectionate, nothing too graphic. It looked like Thomas wanted to take things further, but Cynthia wasn't going along with it. I asked Paul if we could use these videos in court, but we figured we couldn't. However, they were revealing enough to make Cynthia uncomfortable. I thought about using this as a sort of leverage. I decided to let Cynthia know I had the videos, but I planned to do it carefully, without revealing how I got them or what my plans were. I had to be cautious because both the private investigator and I could get in trouble if I wasn't careful. Watching those videos stirred up a lot of emotions in me. I was angry, but also felt sad that Cynthia would risk our marriage over someone so unremarkable. I decided to take a subtle approach and sent one of the videos to Cynthia anonymously. I made sure there was no way to trace it back to me. A few days later, Cynthia got in touch with me for the first time since our split. She wanted to know if I had shared the video with anyone else. I assured her that I had always been honest with her, even though I wished I could say the same about her. In our conversation, Cynthia reached out to me for the first time since our separation. She was clearly distressed, asking if I had shared the video with anyone else. I assured her of my honesty, highlighting that I had always been truthful in our relationship. Cynthia admitted that she couldn't say the same, acknowledging that she deserved my mistrust. Her main concern was whether the video had been circulated beyond us, as she believed that would irreparably damage any chance of reconciliation. She expressed a hope that we could still mend things. Cynthia didn't shy away from the truth. She admitted that while she and Thomas never had physical closeness, she couldn't guarantee it wouldn't have happened if things had continued. She partly justified her actions by pitying Thomas, who had a challenging family life, but admitted that wasn't the whole story. She confessed that the thrill of receiving another man's admiration played a significant role. She acknowledged my consistent praise over the years, but explained how, coming from a husband, it eventually felt less sincere. Cynthia then reflected on a specific incident at a reunion where a man commented on me not ending up with the woman I originally wanted. She felt belittled by this, as though she was just a consolation prize, and deeply hurt that I didn't defend her or affirm my commitment to our marriage. Her silence during this time led her to believe I might have viewed her in the same diminishing light. She explained that entertaining Thomas was partly an attempt to prove to herself that she was someone's first choice. Cynthia also admitted her harsh reactions to me during our earlier conflicts were fueled by her own guilt over what she had done with Thomas. Initially, she filed for divorce as a shock tactic, hoping it would jolt me into action. However, the emergence of the tapes with Thomas destroyed that hope, as she hadn't realized Thomas's extent of manipulation. Cynthia expressed that she deserved punishment for her actions and would carry the guilt with her. Despite this, she hoped that the love and good times we had shared over a decade could be a foundation to rebuild our relationship. She admitted to suppressing her love for me to justify her actions. Referencing the Bible, she spoke about forgiveness and asked for a chance to make things right. If given a second chance and she failed, she vowed to leave the marriage with nothing but her clothes and was willing to sign a postnuptial agreement to that effect. In her emotional plea, tears streamed down her face as she begged for another opportunity to repair our marriage. In our extended conversation, Cynthia seemed to grapple with a mix of emotions. She asked if I was still listening, and I admitted I was holding back from saying something I might regret. I confessed to feeling a profound sense of hatred for someone I still deeply loved. When I questioned her about her relationship with Thomas, she informed me that he was no longer in her life, expressing regret for being flattered by his attention. She revealed that Thomas had been fired from his job after assaulting his wife upon discovering that someone had taken his videos, which he suspected was done on my behalf. His arrest for the assault and battery on his wife led to his dismissal. Cynthia felt guilty for his wife's suffering and suggested that perhaps both of us had made mistakes, proposing the idea of starting anew. She believed we couldn't erase the past but could move forward together, helping each other to forgive and forget. I expressed my uncertainty, struggling to reconcile her words and actions, particularly those captured in the video with Thomas. Cynthia pleaded for belief in her unchanged love for me, explaining that she sought validation from Thomas when she felt undervalued and questioned her self-worth after the reunion incident. I told Cynthia that I couldn't make any promises at the moment. I admitted my fault in not understanding her feelings and not defending her at the reunion. I explained that after my past relationship, I was cautious about rebounding, and it took me a while to realize that I had found another incredible woman in her. I apologized for not making it clear that marrying her had always felt like a win for me. Cynthia mentioned that the recording put her in a difficult position regarding the divorce, and she was not in a strong place to negotiate. She asked if we could consider counseling, questioning if there was any love left for her. I acknowledged that despite the heartbreak, I still loved her, but needed time to process everything and consider forgiveness. I suggested that counseling might be beneficial, but not immediately. We both agreed to delay the divorce hearing, giving us time to contemplate our next steps. As the days turned into months, Cynthia and I continued to navigate the complexities of our strained relationship. She started attending counseling sessions, using her own funds to cover the costs. Occasionally, she'd suggest we meet up to talk, usually preferring to do it at our house, but I often suggested meeting at Starbucks instead. Our meetings were pretty straightforward, mostly just updates on what was going on in our lives. We'd share little things that happened, sometimes recalling a happy or funny memory from our past. These moments often brought some laughter and smiles, a brief respite from the tension. The topic of our marriage inevitably came up. Cynthia made it clear that despite not wanting to rush into divorce, we had to make a decision. She was leaning toward trying to fix our marriage. During her counseling sessions, she gained some insight into why she betrayed me and was confident it wouldn't happen again. As for me, time apart had somewhat softened my stance. I found myself open to the idea of trying to live together again, though I suggested we start with separate bedrooms. I had to admit, a big part of my decision was influenced by financial considerations. The idea of maintaining two separate households was daunting, especially considering our retirement plans. Cynthia seemed genuinely happy with my willingness to give our marriage another shot. She promised to take things slow and prove that I had made the right choice in giving us another chance. While I was packing up to move back with Cynthia, I got a call that stopped me in my tracks. It was Gina, my first serious girlfriend, the one who had always had a special place in my heart. She was in town and wanted to meet up. I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness at the thought of seeing her again after all these years. Back in high school, Gina and I had an on and off thing. She often chose Dale, my popular athletic friend, over me, but there were times when she turned to me, especially when things with Dale were rocky. I cherished those moments, holding on to hope. After one of their breakups, Gina and I even got closer, but Dale had been her first, something I couldn't forget. Then Dale got drafted, and their engagement fell through. Gina came to me, looking for comfort and maybe more. We started dating, and things got serious quickly. However, I was always worried about Dale coming back. My worst fears came true just 3 days after Gina and I got engaged. Dale returned, and Gina left with him, leaving me a note of apology and returning the engagement ring I'd given her. I've kept that ring hidden ever since. Now, here I was, years later, sitting in my car outside the hotel where I was about to meet Gina again. I was early, trying not to seem too eager, but my mind was racing with what this meeting could mean. I decided to keep my guard up and listen more than talk. Seeing Gina again brought back a flood of emotions. She had changed over the years, but to me, she was still stunning. We greeted each other, and I couldn't help but notice how she still affected me. We sat down for dinner, both of us ready to share the long stories of our lives since we'd last seen each other. Seeing Gina again after so many years was surreal. She had changed, sure, her hair was now highlighted, there were wrinkles, and she'd put on some weight, but to me, she was as stunning as ever. As I walked up to her, my nerves almost got the better of me. We exchanged greetings, and there was an undeniable warmth in her embrace. We shared a brief kiss, a moment that took me back in time. As we sat down, I couldn't help but compliment her. Despite her self-deprecating joke about her looks, I honestly saw her as beautiful as ever. She still had that effect on me, something that years and distance hadn't diminished. She joked about my way with words, and we settled in to share our stories. Gina began, and her tale was heartbreaking. She talked about her life with Dale after his military service, how it had changed him. He'd gotten into some bad habits, drinking heavily, and their intimate life was far from loving. It was tough to hear how he had become abusive when she suggested he get help, leading to physical violence. She stayed with him, not out of love, but more out of a sense of obligation and fear of admitting her mistake to everyone we knew. Her life with Dale was a series of hardships, him being discharged from the military, legal troubles, and enduring various forms of abuse. It pained me to hear how low her self-esteem had sunk during those years. She credited a therapist with helping her survive the marriage, which eventually ended with Dale's death due to his drinking. Hearing all this, I felt a mix of sadness for what she'd gone through, and relief that she was now free from that abusive relationship. It was a lot to take in, reminding me that time changes people in profound ways, often hidden beneath the surface. As Gina and I sat across from each other at the hotel dining room, the emotions were palpable. She reached for my hand, a gesture that instantly bridged the years we'd been apart. Gina explained that she had come back to town after hearing about my separation from Cynthia. She confessed that I was the last good memory she had of a relationship, which was quite a statement considering her turbulent past. She reminisced about our high school days and how I was always there for her, despite how she treated me back then. Her return, she said, was an attempt to reconnect and possibly rekindle what we once had. It was my turn to share. I told her about my life with Cynthia, the ups and downs leading to our current separation, and the looming possibility of divorce. I admitted that I hadn't really considered any alternatives to returning to Cynthia, despite the uncertainty and potential for further betrayal. Gina's question about whether I wanted to see more of her caught me off guard. I was torn. Part of me knew it might be foolish to trust her again after she left me once, but another part of me, perhaps the more selfish part, wanted to give us another chance. When she invited me to her hotel room, I hesitated. Even though Cynthia and I were separated, I still felt bound by our marriage. I wasn't ready for an intimate reunion with Gina, but I also didn't want to push her away. In her room, Gina asked simply to be held, and that's what we did for hours. There was a comfort and familiarity in each other's arms that felt surprisingly natural. I asked her how long she planned to stay in town, and she said it was up to me. I was honest with her. I wasn't sure what I wanted yet. She understood and said she'd wait for my decision, making it clear she wanted to be with me, marriage or not. That night left me with a lot to think about. I needed to make a decision about my future with Cynthia, and now Gina's return added another layer of complexity to my already tangled emotions. As I grappled with the decision of whether to move back in with Cynthia or explore a new beginning with Gina, my thoughts were in turmoil. I found myself unable to call Cynthia about moving my belongings back as planned. When she reached out expecting me to have moved back already, I had to break the news to her. My plans had changed. I told her I wasn't ready to move back yet. Cynthia was understandably confused and upset, asking if there was something else she needed to do to convince me to return home. I admitted to her that I was considering a life without her. Despite my efforts to believe in her change, the fear of being hurt again by possible infidelity was too much for me to handle. Cynthia assured me of her faithfulness, but her reassurances came too late. I reluctantly revealed that Gina, my first love, had returned, and I was considering giving our relationship another chance. This revelation hit Cynthia hard. Cynthia remembered Gina vividly, Gina Starlings, who once left me for Dale. She couldn't believe I was willing to trust Gina again after she broke off our engagement years ago. Cynthia questioned how I could doubt her faithfulness while considering rekindling things with Gina. In her frustration, Cynthia suggested she could satisfy my needs if I came back home, but I was firm in my decision. I explained to Cynthia that I needed to see where things would go with Gina. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew I had to explore these feelings. In a moment of anger and hurt, Cynthia lashed out, saying she would find amusement if Gina left me again. She then admitted to seeing someone else, a coworker, and claimed he was far better in bed than I ever was. As our conversation ended, Cynthia broke down, expressing that the moment I mentioned Gina, she felt she had lost me. She believed she was always a second choice in my heart. It was a painful and emotional end to our conversation, leaving both of us with wounds and unresolved feelings. I reached out to my lawyer, pushing for a quick and fair divorce settlement. In the negotiations, I was more generous than I needed to be, particularly about the house. Cynthia didn't put up much resistance, which my lawyer thought she might interpret as a victory on her part in the divorce. Honestly, I wasn't bothered by that. My main focus was on getting the divorce finalized in a few months. During this time of separation, I received several dinner invites and other propositions from women I knew, some of whom were married, but I wasn't interested in any of them. My mind was occupied with just one person, Gina. Gina was busy too, back at her place getting her affairs in order to have more flexibility for our future. We stayed in constant touch, talking every night and visiting each other on alternate weekends. It was during one of our phone conversations that Gina brought up the topic of moving in. She had almost finished sorting out her things and asked if I had found an apartment for her. I hadn't looked for an apartment because I wanted her to move in with me, into our place. Gina seemed okay with the idea but mentioned there was one thing we needed to sort out. Curious, I asked what it was. She playfully hinted that she didn't want two different names on our mailbox. It led to a lighthearted back and forth about how we could solve this problem. I suggested half-jokingly that getting married and sharing a last name would do the trick. Gina, not missing a beat, urged me to properly propose. When I finally did propose, Gina was overwhelmed with emotion, especially when I revealed that the engagement ring I had for her was the same one I gave her years ago and had held on to. We agreed to find a more modern ring with a noticeably larger diamond. Gina accepted my proposal, reflecting on how our past experiences, including her years with Dale, had perhaps cleared the way for us to be together now. She pledged her unconditional love to me, a promise that filled me with happiness. However, I playfully added that I had one important condition for our marriage. I get to be the one who dusts the furniture. It was a light moment, but it signified a new chapter for both of us, a chance to build a life together based on our past experiences and present love.